guys for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started. A couple of announcements. Don't forget the student show is coming up just a couple weeks if you want to enter that. Your instructors will have the information on how to submit to that. Just make sure it's ready to hang with our system. So not a lot of nails in the wall. Again, this is a teaching gallery, so keep in mind we have this handout that has the image list, 1 through 15 this time. 15 being the books and the pedestal in the center where Delaney is there, and there's several different books inside of that container. So number 15 has many different sections. But I encourage you guys to check those out. If you're ever interested in bookmaking workshops and things like that, let me know. I want to thank Professor Finnegans for giving me the name of Professor Kelly to come here and have a show here. She was going to have a show and give a talk. And so she's from an East State in Louisiana. If anybody is interested in going east to your next school, you might want to talk to her about that. But I'll let her talk more about herself and turn it over to Professor Kelly.
First of all, thank all of you for being here today, and I want to especially have a word of thanks to Dominic Hagan for instigating this exhibition, and for Linda for welcoming me here, and also to Bobby and Chris for installing the work so quickly, so efficiently, and so beautifully on Friday. But today I want to talk about a few things. First of all, I want to talk about why James Joyce and why Finnegans Wake, and I want to talk about what a midden is and how these books and things and collages relate to the idea of a midden. And then at the end I'll take questions, but if there's some point of clarification that you'd like as I'm going along, go ahead and ask me. That won't bother me at all. So, first of all, what drew me to Joyce initially was a great class that I had when I was a college freshman. It was a literature class, and in that class we were reading Dubliners first, and then we read Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. And then at a certain point in the semester, the professor, Willard Sweetleman, said, kind of threw down the gauntlet anyway. He said, well, if you like Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, well, then you'll like Ulysses. And if you like Ulysses, then there's Finnegans Wake, which he described as being ineffable, to being beyond words or description. And so that caught my attention, and I really had no idea that when I was a 17, 18-year-old freshman in college, that James Joyce, and especially his book Finnegans Wake, would be as important as it is to me now, so many years later, but it has stayed with me to that point. So kind of be aware that things that you take in as students, as artists, it may not be directly from art, it might be from a literature class, a science class, might have an impact on your career at a later point. Finally, I did get around to reading Ulysses, and I loved it. One reason it was familiar to me because I could hear my grandmother's my Irish grandmother's quirky sense of humor there, some of her phrases. Her scatological sense of humor is present in Ulysses as well. And my first instinct when I was reading the book was to do some drawings, and I did a few drawings because the book is so very visual. On a subsequent reading, I made about 100 little paintings, about 8 by 10 on average. And when I finished that project, there was looming in front of me that ineffable book, Finnegans Wake. And so with some kind of trepidation, I turned to Finnegans Wake and tried to read it. And it's a real challenge to read. It's considered one of the most difficult books in the English language for two reasons. First of all, it's not really written in English whatsoever. It's written in a sort of an English, but Joyce in it has put, what he said, he put language to sleep. And it's a dream language, kind of a world language. And he puns in the book in as many as, according to some counts, as 50 languages and dialects. So there's all kind of richness to the languages there. And secondly, because it's a dream book, the characters, and there's not a go-ahead kind of plot. There's not a logical plot structure. And the characters, like when you have a dream, you know how somebody changes to another person. That's exactly what happens in Finnegans Wake. They're shapeshifters in the book. So you kind of have to find your bearing into it. So my first reading through, I was really struggling to get through. And so I read some commentaries. I would read along and try to make some sense of it. And so in that first reading through, I was really clinging to the moments of clarity that I could find. There are moments of clarity. Not all of it is opaque and dense and dark as some of the pages are. So that first project that I did, first artistic project I did in relation to the wake, was to do a series of these large figurative representational paintings that have almost an illustrational kind of quality to them. They're about the moments in the text. As well as those paintings, I made some collages kind of early on, related to some extent to these that are here. And I made a series of prints, intaglio prints, of a prominent feature in the wake. Joyce put in on the very first page the first of these 100-letter-long words for thunder. And so I made 10 prints that are in typographic relation to that. So I did a lot of work, but then I felt like I was still in the clutches of the book. Once you get in, it's hard to get loose from it. And I decided I wanted to do another body. And so what I decided, I was at a residency one summer, and over about a 6-week period, I read aloud all the way through Finnegans Wake. It was kind of a long, arduous oral reading. Fortunately, I was by myself. No one had to hear me read it. And it was a great experience for me. One thing about the book is it's written phonetically. And if you read it aloud, you'll have Joyce's accent. You'll sound like you have a Dublin accent because the words are written in that manner. So it's kind of tricky in that regard. But while I was in that oral reading over that summer, I decided that I would revisit collage and that I would make some artist books, and also I made some vitrine-size installations at that time period. And the main difference between the first body of work and then this current body that I'm working on here is its intention. I think with the first paintings I did, I wanted to kind of try to illustrate the way, but I don't know that that's really possible. But with this body of work, it's more about examining Joyce's aesthetics and the materials he used as the source for his book. He used many, many sources. He used all sorts of found materials and appropriated things from literature, from history, from jokes his father told him. He brought in all sorts of things to bear in Finnegans Wake. It's very complicated and rich. And so I thought that maybe the idea would be for me to work on the basis of this idea of this collection, this midden, if you will, this big pile of ideas. And which does bring me to the idea of what a midden is. A feature of both Ulysses and Finnegans Wake is the presence of extremely long lists. There are lists that will be of items or names of things, 100 or more elements in it. And as you read through the list, each one is funnier and stranger, more absurd than the last. And one of the lists that I particularly love is in the chapter that's about Shem the artist in Finnegans Wake. And in his house is supposed to be just a mass with all sorts of debris. That's described as a midden, and what a midden is, it could be simply a trash pile, a debris pile, or a dung heap. But the artist Shem uses the materials of that midden as a source for his artwork. And it says that he even takes the objects in the midden, makes ink from that, and writes on his own body. So there's kind of all these allusions to artistic creation in conjunction with this character Shem. Shem is the Irish version of James, and the character Shem in Finnegans Wake is something of a stand-in for James Joyce himself. This artist Shem is called an alchemist because he transforms in almost an alchemical way the materials of his midden heap, and he transforms this debris into artistic goals, the way you might want to look upon it. Finnegans Wake is filled with all sorts of references, stories and jokes Joyce's father told to him, and what Joyce does is conflate these things with things from popular culture, from children's stories and games, but also from world religion, works of literature, and everything else. So in a way, he digests high art and low art, and puts it all together in this book in a transformative kind of way, Finnegans Wake. And the idea of sourcing, I think one's work in the ordinary and sometimes even the useless, or maybe something that is looked down upon, like a midden heap, speaks to the brilliance of Joyce. He really conflates the two of these elements in this book. There's one example of one of the products that he uses. And in this book, there's all sorts of products that are mentioned. You can see a little edge of an advertisement for Altoids. And Altoids is present in Finnegans Wake, but comes in the form of, the quote is, deltoids, curiously strong. And so with that, you get the idea of a breath mint, a deltoid shoulder muscle that's curiously strong, but also a river delta. And that gives you a sense of something of the way that Joyce complicates and enriches language. It's kind of fiercely complicated. So I want to talk about a couple of the paintings. There are two of these paintings that have midden peaks in them. Primarily, maybe most especially is the one that's on the poster that Fong made, and I wanted to thank Fong as well for making the lovely posters and the material for the show. But in the middle, those are objects that I have in my studio, and I don't have a mound of them like that in my studio. It's a fanciful midden peak, but I do have those particular individual objects. But in the background, there is a mountain that is a real mountain. It's a real place. It's called the Sleeping Giant Mountain, and it's near New Haven, Connecticut. And it's one of my earliest memories. And in Finnegans Wake, there is a sleeping giant. It's Finn the Cool of Irish legend, and the body of the sleeping giant forms some of the architectural and geographic landmarks around Dublin. And so with the painting, it's not. I think it's not in any way an illustration of necessarily Finn the Cool, but it's referencing both the sleeping giant of Finnegans Wake and the midden peak idea as well. This painting is a close-up of a midden peak, and these are some objects that are in my studio. And the first collage that's on it's number 1 on your checklist, the title list, is a photograph of the corner of the studio. And this portion, and this painting is references a number of the objects that are there. My midden, the title of this painting, first of all, is called Items from the Lumber Room. And the word lumber is used in the arcane sense of the word lumber room. From the 17th to the 19th century, lumber rooms, lumber referred to useless knowledge or useless objects. And so if a forest was being felled in that time period, they would value the hardwoods like oak, but they would consider a pine tree to be useless lumber. And then eventually the word shifted and it became to apply to all kinds of wood. So items from a lumber room is like the junk room. These are items from my junk room midden peak studio. And there's a garfish skull that I actually found here, and a for real kitchen midden, a Native American kitchen midden is near Creole, Louisiana. And there's some other items of nature and tools and bouncy balls and just a bunch of similar things. The last collage is way on that wall, the last collage on that particular wall, is an image of another sort of midden. And that's a midden, well, the title of the work is called Biddy Doran. In Finnegans Wake, there's the most adorable hymn in all literature. Her name is Biddy Doran. She gets on top of a midden heap, she scratches through, and she finds a letter, and that letter is Finnegans Wake in some way. And so the hen you might see the image of that hen is sort of another of Joyce's self-deprecating self-portraits. So Shem the artist with his messy house, but also Biddy Doran finding this letter in Finnegans Wake. The collages that I'm working on here are based upon I would call it a midden of ephemera that I have in my studio. I have a lot of intaglio proofs, photographs, printed material, and all sorts of other things. Found papers as well, and those are the sources for the collage materials that are present on the wall. Like that. The collages are part of the current project. I'm in the midst of making a collage per page in its way. It has 628 pages, which is really pretty terrifying to think about. But I started out, and I did a sporadic number of them, 50 or so here and there. And these on the wall are from that initial 50. And I worked systematically from page 3 to 74. So I have about 125 done, and about 500 to go that I'll make here one day at least, or maybe at some period of time. And the word about the process for these collages, and what I'm doing is I'm rereading at a much slower pace through the book than I did during that residency time period. I'm going very slowly through and reading the book with an eye and an ear to Joyce's use of his transformative use of found materials. And he did use all sorts of odd references, odd sources to create Finnegans Wake. And I want to echo that just in the method of creation in the collage project. As I'm going along making the collages, I'm also making artist books. This was the first of the ones related to the collages, and it reproduces a few of the works that you see on the wall in here. And then there's some others that are coming on this as well. Joyce spent 17 years writing this book that is so terrifically complicated. He said that he said the book was a history of the world. And I guess it is in a certain respect. It starts off in a place that has a Eden-like quality, and then history proceeds. There's a cyclical view of history that's projected in Finnegans Wake. He said he was looking for an ideal reader with an ideal insomnia. And I think a diligent reader is rewarded. It's not easygoing by any means. It's really terrifically challenging, probably too challenging in some ways, but there is a reward there. One reward is there's tremendous, it's a wild ride, and there's an expansive array of allusions, literary allusions, all sorts of ecological allusions as well. But also, I think what it gives to you is a real sense of the possibility for language, the nuances of language, the sound of language, the musicality of language. And maybe the third thing is this, that there's lots of fun at Finnegans Wake. Joyce quotes that Irish American ballad, the Ballad of Finnegans Wake, and he says it over and over again through the book as to encourage you, I think, that there's lots of fun at Finnegans Wake. I'm happy to take questions if you have some.
Yes.
All right.
No, it's good you stopped at that, because those of you who haven't had a Irish childhood drinking in bars and listening to Finnegans Wake, that illusion comes up. But what is your take on it? Many of us, as I have to confess, started Finnegans Wake probably 100 years ago and will never finish it. And he did have personally 17 to 20 languages under his belt.
Yeah.
But what would you expect somebody to get you into your didactic mode with students to get out of Finnegans Wake if they read it?
I think if you read it, I think the main star of the book is language. I think that's really what it is. There is a narrative drive here, and there's a personal aspect that Joyce always had an autobiographical aspect to his work. But I think that his love of just sound and language is what comes out of it. And so if you're oriented toward that, and if you like puzzles and challenges and enigmas, I think you might be drawn to it. I think there's an idea that there's one reason that we read literature, and one reason you read is to find out new things. And another reason that you read is to kind of find yourself in that book, and if it's kind of a fit for your personality, I think you will gravitate toward it and you will love it and get caught. But if it's going to turn off some people right on the first page, and it's too hard. He really made it too hard, but he kind of did this.
And actually, linguistically, it's a never-ending book.
Yes, it is. It starts out with the uncapitalized root one and ends with the, so you're supposed to start over again.
God help you.
The book is just based off a dream that came up, just Finnegans Wake, like him waking up in the woods.
It's kind of like that, right? But it's supposed to be the story of history. There's this idea of this Italian writer, had this notion of this history presented itself in the cycles of this theocratic and autocratic and democratic. And it goes on, and with each shift in history, there's the voice of God speaks, and there's thunder, and then something happens, and something changes. And you get a sense of time passing in the beginning. It starts out river running past Eve and Adam, so you sound like you're in the Garden of Eden, but if you know it, it's really a church that's on the River Ridge in Dublin. It's called Adam and Eve's Church. So it's, I don't know.
It's kind of, I don't know, it seems confusing.
Yeah.
That's a good point, though. It seems confusing, but it seems like you're using your work to kind of figure it out, and using your artwork to figure it out in different ways. So I was wondering if it was important, like the painting is like maybe specified to a certain kind of expression, or figuring out a certain point. and then the books are maybe something different, or do you use a process to help, like, the shift in process to help you figure it out as well?
Yeah, I think the paintings, for the most part, have been more almost illustrational or more narrative-based, and the collages are more almost stylistically based, is that a better way to put it? But I think even with, there's the painting back there that's called the Magazine Wall, and the one on the right, they're both called Magazine Wall, but the one on the right is, has kind of a collage aspect to it, and it references, and as well as brings to light some of the events that happen at that particular place. And it, I mean, I think if you read that section, the description of the Magazine Wall, and look at the painting, it would feel like an illustration to some extent. And that, I think, is the big difference between the two processes. But the books are kind of, they're like versions of the collages, and I like the idea of a reproduction of a reproduction of a reproduction. I like all these kind of generations that you can take some.
Did you say that this was the first time that a literary work had inspired you this way?
I mean, to this extent. I've done some other books before, but when Joyce has been when I was an undergrad, I did some woodcuts based on different proverbs. Those are very visual stories and phrases. Yes. That's it. Okay. So this is the first.
How long did it take you to create this work? How long is it?
I've been painting over on that wall. I've worked on it probably until the late summer, this past summer, and I worked on it every day for a lot of hours every day.
A lot of times.
And then probably the same on that one as well. The collages looked like they would take that long to do, but I don't worry over them so much. It takes time to figure out the right use. They're kind of slow. They were done over a period of summer. I had a residency in 2012 in County Kerry. I was out in the west, and that's most of those during that.
Who's number 2, portrait of?
It's a portrait of James Joyce, and it's based on a Zurich photograph of Joyce from, I think it's from 1914. I might be off on the date of that. It was close to there, but it's, but I used, if you look at it up close, likening it to Joyce's use of all these commercial products that he has in Finnegans Wake. So you see Jimmy Dean sausage and Doritos, and in his beer there's a chocolate milk carton, and all other stuff.
When did he write the book?
He wrote it between, when he finished it in 1939, so 17 years before that, so 22 years ago.
I can't let it pass to show what transpired with him in language and his father, because one of the worst puns in history when he found out who Joyce's girlfriend was, and then wife, Nora Barnacle,
Yep,
said she'll always stick with you.
that's right. I know, those puns are everywhere. He also said that if Jesus had found the church upon then so I can write Finnegans Wake upon this, because, you know, thou art Peter Petros,
Right.
and upon this rock I'll build my church. So he said, well, you know, very good. Thank you very much for your attention.